an associate architectural historian with Historic Resources Group out of Pasadena. And I was asked to talk about the Intercultural Council Houses, which is a small district. I will emphasize small. It's 12 buildings here in Claremont. It's about 1.6 miles away from where we are currently.
Sorry, I'm sharing with the rest of the people that are remote, so I think.
Will it mess it up if I switch over to the video?
No, it won't at all. So just let me know when you want to do that.
All right, so I'm actually gonna start you off with this video that Claremont Heritage shares the directories in the back there. They this video about the history of the Intercultural Council Houses, the Intercultural Council itself, and the kind of desegregation of Claremont.
It started sometime after World War II, probably 47, 48. We were still segregated into the barrio, but this block was the first attempt at integrating it.
There was a church, Catholic church. There was a pool hall called Chema's. There was all these cats and dogs running around. There was these houses there, and it was like something out of a John Steinbeck novel.
The block was purchased in a tax sale by the Intercultural Council. I believe it was financed by the Pomona Valley Housing Authority, which then gave individual mortgages to the home builders.
I believe 12 houses built, and 6 of them went to white people and 6 of them went to Mexican families. We moved to Claremont in 1949. I was 4.5 years old. We moved into this house that was built as a result of the Intercultural Council.
I think the crutcher plans, they call it, mostly was this flat roof, the plywood construction, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the transoms, single-wall plywood, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. I think possibly the Alvarez house might have been built with 3 bedrooms. I remember as a kid it was a little bit bigger.
The houses were different sizes and different shapes, and each one was designed specifically for the families that ended up purchasing the houses.
There was 2 options. You could either elect to build a house yourself according to the plans provided by the ICC, or you could have the ICC's contractor build a house for you. So they're long and rectangular. And on First Street and Blanchard, they are oriented north and south, back to back.
And there was a grass area in between all the houses that was called the park.
There were Mexicans, and then there were Chris and, other kids, the white children. But we all played together.
It wasn't a quarter, it was just a field of grass bordered with paracantha bushes.
Friend Roger's mother was involved with a thing called the Club de Damas.
That came about from women who felt that there needed to be something going on with the community and the Mexican American women helping out. My mom and 2 of my aunts were trying to figure out a way to raise money for the Mexican baseball team, who were named the ACs. And they didn't have uniforms. So my mom's idea was to have a Jamaica in the church parking lot. The men would build like a wooden booth, and then they would put palm fronds over the top and decorate it with paper, etc. And they thought, well, if we sell tacos and drinks and maybe some rice and beans or something else, we can make money to be able to buy the uniforms for the team. There was also the Well Baby Clinic. My mom was a big part of that too. In one of the pictures, it actually shows Dr. Wilcox and my mom and some other women from the body holding a baby, and what would happen is Dr. Wilcox would look at the children and check them out to be sure they were doing well, had their shots, and were well, not sick. And that was for a lot of the families that couldn't afford to take their kids to the doctor's office. What they would do is they would share their homes. So one month it would be at our house, another month it would be at someone else's house. But he would go to the home and look at the babies to see if they were okay.
The building boom in the 50s was in full swing by the time I was in elementary school, and many of the kids that I grew up with were also growing up in new houses. This is the barrio, but all the families here were homeowners. There was no projects here, no mean streets, you know, no apartments. It was all single family residence homeowners, even though we were Latino and we were pushed to this part, the extremities of town, right by the county line. So we jumped the county line after World War II through the auspices of the ICC, and I went to, you know, Oakmont and Sycamore as integrated schools. Whereas my mother went to segregated schools in Claremont. My father went to segregated schools in San Dimas.
One of the things that was very interesting at that time is that a lot of the Chicano community was trying to assimilate in those days. Like in the 60s when La Raza and all that stuff happened, or they went all in the other direction. But in those days it was about assimilation and about let's see how we can all work together.
As your fortunes improved in the late 50s, early 60s, you were chasing the American dream. That was a bigger car, bigger house, a nicer neighborhood. And the philosophy then for Mexican Americans was to assimilate and don't learn Spanish. My parents never taught me Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I'm an American. We became acculturated, you know, that was just the theme.
I think the concept that the Intercultural Council had of bringing interracial families together was a good idea, and their intentions were good. Pretty much the children just got to know one another on the weekends and then after school. But as far as the families really getting together to spend time together, to get to know one another, I don't think that really happened. You know, the crazy thing is, even today, I think things are really a lot the same. The intentions are good to have everyone get along together and do things together and love your neighbor and love everyone of different races, but everyone has their own, you know, their own prejudices, their own biases, their own, maybe it's not as out there as it used to be, but it's still there.
What it did for me as a person is that it made me aware that culture is culture and people are people, and it doesn't matter where they're from or who they are, they're great people. And I've met some of the best people that I've ever met living in this community who came from a different cultural background than me, and I got a chance to find out about a culture that I would probably not have known about had I not been living there.
All right, so that was kind of our preface to what I'm going to be talking about today, which is the actual houses that they lived in and the community that they inhabited. So I wrote this National Register nomination at David's request. I was a grad student at the University of Delaware, and I was searching desperately. I'm from LA, so I was searching desperately for a way to get my foot back in the door to come home. And so I emailed countless conservation organizations, and David answered and came up with, I was looking for a National Register nomination, just to say, something to nominate for a class. And he emailed me back and said, hey, there's this group of houses in the Arbor Verde neighborhood called the Intercultural Council Houses. I'd love to talk to you about them and let's see if you can do this National Register nomination. And I took a look and I fell in love with the story of what was intended and what happened here. And so this is what resulted from that. So we're looking at this through the lens of integrity, and so the buildings in this district have been altered over time, but I'm looking at this more as a culturally significant neighborhood. So as we discussed earlier, you know, maybe integrity of design or integrity of materials and alteration have not diminished their integrity. Basically what I'm trying to say. Anyway, moving on. So, there we go. Yeah. Right. So, as we learned earlier, it's an experiment in desegregation of Claremont, and they were trying to bring together these two cultures that were kind of resistant to being brought together. At the time that the Intercultural Council project was conceived, Mexicans were not allowed to own property in Claremont. So the Intercultural Council bought this 12 lots in the Arbor Verde tract. They were tax delinquent, so they bought them for a little bit lower rate. Together it comprises roughly 2.5 acres. And so they dreamed of a mixed Anglo-Mexican community to overcome racial inequality and racial privilege in Claremont. The housing experiment was called the Intercultural Council Houses, or Neighbors Incorporated, Neighbors Inc., by Claremont residents. So the Anglo residents were graduate students at Claremont Graduate University, and the Mexican inhabitants were local Mexican people that were trying to live in Claremont and not previously. So this is a sample. Sorry. Stand back here.
I can turn it down a bit.
This is a sample. Floor plan. So Louis Crutcher, a student of Millard Sheets, who I hope you all know who Millard Sheets is. He designed a lot of the mosaics on Centers and Loan Banks, and he designed several of those banks as well. He was an artist and an architect, and he was head of he was at the art department at Scripps College. So Louis Crutcher was a student of Millard Sheets. He designed these 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom spec floor plans for these Intercultural Council houses. They were built cheaply with marine 5-ply plywood, waterproof glue, 2x4s, 4x4s, that sort of thing. It was the post-war, these are new, exciting materials, but they're cheap, so it will drive down the cost of these houses. So 6 out of the 12 houses in the Intercultural Council neighborhood were built according to, I'm muted. Okay. 6 out of the 12 houses were built according to the plans, and Lou Crutcher, or the contractor hired by many of these people, advised in the other 6 cases many times. So the contractor, Roger Curtis, cost the people about $2,500 to hire to help build these houses. So if they didn't feel that they could afford that, they built them on their own. So it's either $5,000 for the house built by Roger Curtis, or $2,500 if you built it yourself, not including the cost of the plans, which cost them $35. So, and the Intercultural Council themselves offered these new residents a loan at a 4% interest rate to help them in construction of their homes. The lots themselves cost between $450 and $600. So the houses took about 5 years to construct, and as I said, they were built cheaply. And because of the plywood walls, electrical wiring was running conduits over the walls. Many of them, especially the houses built specifically to Lou Crutcher's plans, came across some problems over time. The flat roofs were hot in the summer. They didn't provide much insulation between the hot sun and the inside of the houses. Same thing with the plywood walls. So roof lines changed. Stucco cladding was applied to the exteriors, as you can see here, and to mitigate those problems. So. Excuse the photo. I took this for research, not intending to use it in a presentation, but this is the arrangement of the Intercultural Council houses. The houses are arranged around this central courtyard here. The tot yard is over here. It's a communal tot yard, communal drying yard, a washroom, which also served as the well baby clinic. There were 2 parking lots, and a communal phone line, a communal barbecue, a communal incinerator. So this was kind of seen as a very early condo or co-op development. They paid into the maintenance of this central yard area, but they each had their own specific areas as well. And this went on for went on well for about 10 years. The neighbors knew each other. They interacted in this rear court area. People that didn't live there also were welcome to come and spend time in the communal areas. But in 1959, 1960, maintenance of the park began to waver. People didn't really want to volunteer to mow the lawn or pay the communal telephone bill, that kind of thing. And there was another alleged reason, I cannot confirm, that Paul Darrow, who was the father of the Caucasian gentleman in the film, he sold his house to a gay couple in 1957, which upset several of the residents who did not want to share facilities with them. And the couple complained that local Mexicans would come to basically their backyard. They had a fence between their house, which was this house, and kind of the backyard area. And Mexican teenagers would come to the back of their holding and they would make love, apparently. So they were so upset by this that they asked the Intercultural Council's attorney to have the park surveyed and divided up. So before this, all of these 12 homeowners owned a 1/12 holding in the central courtyard, but they divided up the park so that they each have a long, narrow lot now. So, and they each have fences around their specific holdings. So as a result of something, whether it's wavering maintenance or something else, the central courtyard vanished by 1960, and that ended the Neighbors Inc. experiment. However, that didn't necessarily stop the people that lived in the Intercultural Council houses from trying to be a community. There was a woman named Marilyn Noble who turned her house, which is next door to this house over here, into a neighbor youth center and provided tutors for Mexican American kids as a quiet study hall, that sort of thing, in 1962. And even today, the neighbors know each other, they know the history, they know what happened there and why these houses exist. And the Intercultural Council houses, while it may not have been successful in erasing racial tensions, as we heard in the film, it was one of the earliest integrated housing experiments in Southern California, if not the earliest. And it definitely led to the creation or conceptualization of several other similar projects, and therefore to the desegregation of several communities. So this is a photo of 3 of the houses built to the Crutcher plans. This is First Street looking west towards the college. The college is actually up here. So circa 1950, I think they were very excited about their house. And so we're going back to this question of condition versus integrity. As I said, these houses had problems. They got hot in the summer, they got cold in the winter. On a day like today, it's probably pretty cold in one of those houses that doesn't have insulation. So the inhabitants would have stuccoed the exteriors, they changed the pitch of their roof. Some of these were not built to the Crutcher plans initially anyway. So like there's a house that was built out of concrete block that was preferable to these plywood houses, that sort of thing. This is the former washing room, which exists behind one of the houses today. Also has been stuccoed. And so the idea behind our tour was for us to go and look at these houses for ourselves and to assess integrity. I wouldn't tell you how I feel about it. I wanted to hear what you guys thought. So do you think that they retain any or all of the 7 aspects of integrity? So we can head over there, or if you'd like, I have another way that we can look at these houses. I can use photos. So show of hands, who actually wants to go outside and who wants to stay here warm and dry. One person wants to go outside. All right. So I guess we'll stay here. So we pause for 1 second while I go grab my So we're going to do a virtual survey. As you can tell, the last time that I went out to take pictures of these intercultural council houses, it was on a rare rainy day in Claremont. So you feel like you're there, right? So this is kind of a contextual shot. I'm looking down Blanchard here, looking west, southwest, I believe. So this is where our houses start and they continue this way. So across the street, no intercultural council houses. They were just a block, literally like a tiny little city block. So this is the Darrow house. It's kind of hard to see from the street. So this is another way that you can see the challenges posed to surveyors. This is from the public right of way, my legal right. So this house was originally built to the Crutcher plans, but it has had a enclosure of, here, I can show you a better example of what I'm talking about. I believe so. I think that this actually is cladding applied to the exterior, but it should still have its plywood walls. So, yes. So, we'll continue looking and you guys can do your assessment. We can discuss. So, this is its next door neighbor. This, I believe, was originally built similar to the Crutcher plans, but it does not any longer have its flat roof. It was pitched at some point to its front gable. Each house, yeah, I think we're glad we didn't go outside. It's pouring. These houses have carports attached, and you'll see that some of them have enclosed them over time to add more livable space. Oops. This is actually John Dominguez's house, the gentleman who was speaking in the film, by a different house. He has owned over time 3 of these houses. He is so invested in the history of this community that he wants to buy these houses and restore them and keep the history alive. And you would have met him had we been able to venture outside. But so this is his house, the house that he lived in when he was growing up. His father, he says, he bought a boxcar and tore it to scrap and built the house using those materials. So he was advised by Roger Curtis, the contractor, and I think he was friends with Lou Crutcher as well, so he kind of talked to him about the design for the house, which is why it looks very similar. So, and as you can tell, it, you know, has a very thin roof, very flat. So, but there was a carport here at some point that was enclosed to make his sister's bedroom. This house was not built, obviously, to the Crutcher plans, and this wall over here leads to a garage addition that happened after 1960. So another context shot looking back towards where we just came from. And look, it's still raining. This is looking down Brooks Avenue. So we're going around the corner. This is that house that we just looked at. This house, can't really see from the street. There's a lot of vegetation here, so see what you will. Again, this is the house next door. This is the best that I could do. I actually have gone inside this house, as you will see. So this is the interior of that house. They have added on extensively in the back, but you can't see it from the public right of way. So as you can tell, the kitchen was probably renovated or remodeled at some point. But she still has her clear story windows here. And that's the laundry room and well baby clinic that's in the backyard of her house. They use it as a laundry room. This is the house next door to that. This is probably one of the more intact examples, although it also has a rear addition. You can see its carport and the supports that they used throughout. I also went inside this house, so I'm not trespassing. She let me on her property. So this is from the addition, looking back into their original house. The original houses were teeny. So this is in her house. Excuse the clutter. They've opened up their ceiling to make kind of a loft area for their cats. You know, I don't actually know that. I think, I don't know. You're fine. Yeah, probably around 800 square feet. They're 2 to 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. So this is just an example of the electrical conduits coming down the plywood wall. Oops, sorry, I went backwards. That's just looking into her house. This is the house next door. This was not built to the Kutcher plans. And then another context shot rounding the corner. This house you can't really see at all from the street, but it is fairly intact from what I can tell. Again, we're glad we didn't go outside because we would be drowning. But it's one of the houses that you can see in that historic photo that I showed you earlier. So it wouldn't have had all of this vegetation growing in front, but you could, it is very similar to what it looked like back then. It's just been stuccoed. This is actually another house that John Dominguez owns, or I don't know if he still owns it. He owned it 2 years ago. He was in the process of applying for a Mills Act to restore it back to its original appearance. So this house has been stuccoed as well, as you can see, and some windows have been replaced. And there's a 2-story garage in the backyard. And it looks like a hurricane outside. Yeah. See, aren't you glad that you changed your mind? Okay. All right, so this house is now owned by Claremont McKenna College, and it was owned by John Dominguez. It's his 3rd house that he owned, and he was the one that restored it to look this way. If you go inside, there's some beautiful wood floors that he laid, I believe. So, and the house next door, unfortunately, would be our 12th house, but it's gone. It was remodeled by Claremont McKenna College. 1 wall remains of the original house. So, but 11 of the 12 houses still exist on the parcel that they originally inhabited. If you go into the backyards, their fences aren't super tall. They're kind of waist height. They can still see each other. They still talk to each other. Everybody knows everybody. But yeah, so if we want to, we can go through the 7 aspects of integrity. Yes, Jenna. Yeah, so the question is how many houses were built to the original plan, and it was six houses. So these 3 right here in this picture were built to the original plan. So 1, 2, 3, and then, sorry, Pear's house, that greenhouse that we just went past. I think this house was not, I'm not sure. Here, let me use my cheat sheet. No, it was not. It was not. They didn't have to build by the plan. That was just kind of a courtesy afforded to them. I think they were encouraged to build to the plan. They kind of wanted the cohesion, but yeah, yes. So yes, they had size parameters and not necessarily materials. It was more what they could afford. But yeah. So further questions or yes, Don? The question is when were most of the additions done and where they are. Most of the additions were done post 1960, which is where I ended my period of significance for the National Register nomination, because that was when the park was divided. Correct, but I will leave it up to you to tell me whether they detract. Most of them are rear additions. You can't see them from the public right of way. Jenna. Yes. Yes. Right. So the Jenna commented that these houses are set at an angle if you look at them on Google Earth, as opposed to the surrounding areas, which are more set facing the street. And I neglected to mention, so thank you for reminding me, that these houses were built at an angle to give them a sorry, I want to go back to my PowerPoint, but to give them a mountain view. But also, if you look at the original floor plans that Lou Crutcher drew, is actually something that I discovered a little while ago that I didn't notice when I was writing my nomination. But so there's this orientation view, which is normally kind of your compass rose, your north, south, east, west. And north is for the Darrow house, which is our northeasternmost house. North is facing kind of diagonally through the house, but the rest of your points on this circle, you have the view, and I can't read this from here, so give me one sec. So your view faces up. So this is where the view would come in. This is where the hot sun is, apparently, according to this. Hot sun. And breeze goes this way. So it cuts through the whole house. And then the morning sun comes in this way. So, yes. So orientation, yeah, and I apologize for neglecting to mention that earlier. But yes, orientation toward the mountains and kind of the natural ventilation that he tried to add. So the question is, even the houses that were not designed to the Crutcher plans were oriented that way. And I think that's true, with the possible exception of one or two houses that were just kind of. Yes, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. Yes, so these, yeah. So I guess, yeah, you're right. Although if you look at this house now, this house at the corner of Blanchard and Brooks, faces basically directly onto the street. So these dotted outlined ones may not have actually come to reality. So these are actually the houses that I was thinking of that might not be facing the canted the same way. So yes. Yes, they definitely do qualify for criterion A. They were listed on the National Register for their cultural significance and their ethnic heritage, Mexican ethnic heritage. It's listed under the Latinos in 20th Century California MPD. Yes, it's criterion A. These don't really rise to the level, I think, of a wonderful example, or especially given the alterations. I'm giving myself away here with my integrity, but I don't think that they rise to the level necessary for mid-century modern architecture in Southern California for being listed under criterion C. So, any integrity evaluations or whatnot, or more questions? We can.
I forgot to mention earlier, one of our speakers likes to use the mnemonic for integrity, and he calls it MAD flaws. So if that helps you remember all 7 of them, MAD flaws.
Apparently there's a mnemonic, MAD flaws. So, but we can start with location. That's always what I start with. So, are these houses in their original locations? Yes. Yes. So, setting. Do they retain integrity of setting? So. Mm-hmm. Yes. I would say, so the question is, does the removal of the communal play area and just the neighbor's yard go into the integrity of setting? And I personally, I guess kind of, I don't think necessarily that the removal of the play yard and the rest of the communal spaces detracts from integrity of setting enough to say that it doesn't retain it. I do think it's a consideration. Yes. Right, right. So I think that, yes. Yeah.
You mentioned that after the experiment with Endo, that as I heard you, is that people start putting fence in and they start changing the original design of the common area. And looking at some of the photographs you have, it looks like there's some block walls along the street post.
Right.
There's a lot of vegetation now that was from the town area. And so from my perspective, I think the integrity of setting is questionable.
Yes.
And I think that because there's so much of that common area and that original sort of common area that is so important to the integration of the races and living together, I don't think
Okay. That's what we're here to discuss. So I'm not going to argue. My period of significance was roughly 1947 to 1960, when the park was divided up. At 1960 was when the park was divided. Yeah. I don't know exactly when in 1960, but yes. There were already tract homes. It's the far southeastern corner of this tract, the Arbor tract. It's at the county line. So the county line would be right here. Yes. So.
Now I have a question because the initiative, the statewide initiative from SHPO to designate and give more attention to Latino statewide sites. I think they received a grant for it, or they're distributing grants for it across the state.
I think so.
What was it like working with the SHPO to get this nomination pushed through, and what would you have for advice as far as anybody else trying to do this kind of work?
Well, the SHPO was remarkably helpful. So I worked with Bill Berg. I don't know if any of you have worked with him before, but he's one of the SHPO's reviewing team. And so he looked at this nomination and another I had submitted for the Cypress Street Schoolhouse in Orange simultaneously, because they were both under the same MPD. And he was very on board with getting this pushed through, and because of that initiative and just because of the incredible story that this little block has to tell. So he worked with me as a little grad student. You know, I didn't necessarily know all of the tools of the trade at that point. I was one semester in. So so he helped me a lot. He taught me a lot. He was very patient with me, but it definitely, it was kind of a joint effort with him. So, yes. Question is, what was my takeaway from, oh yeah. So what was my takeaway from writing this National Register nomination one semester into my grad school career? And it was, I think partially, you know, I knew that it was complicated going in, but I didn't realize how complicated it was. So I really got to know the nuances of integrity as it pertains to cultural history. And I was working on two culturally significant properties for a similar reason in two different areas. Because for slight background, the Cypress Street Schoolhouse is located in the Cypress Street barrio in Orange, and it was a Mexican American elementary school. So, and then they closed that down and integrated with the Killefer School, which is just a couple blocks over. Kind of similar time frame, or a little earlier. But so I think it taught me basically how to write a National Register nomination, but also that integrity really isn't cut and dry. It differs in the eye of the beholder and how you can spin something necessarily, even though these may not retain all aspects of their integrity. I think they still tell an important story, which is, the desegregation of ultimately Claremont, and the story lives on despite the breakup of the central courtyard. So. Yeah, I don't know what the comps are in the neighborhood, but yes. Sure.
Is, given how cheap that construction was, you talked about, how do they insulate the houses, for just the habitability? And how is that, has it changed, how the buildings are perceived in that site?
So the question is how they, because they were built cheaply, how the insulation would have been added. Yes.
Basically, it's not like a proper wall construction like you have today.
Yeah, it's a single board. Mm-hmm. It's like a plywood wall. It is a plywood wall, yeah.
It's almost kind of shanty-esque, if you will.
Yeah.
So I'm curious when you come inside, because we're not going out there. How does that, when you go inside, do the houses still feel like they're, to bring it back to a better term, does it still feel like it's a shanty when you're inside?
So you
don't see the thickness of the walls, or
yeah.
you don't see the insulation, sort of the cheapest of construction. I would imagine, because people who are living in these houses want and can afford, presumably, to insulate their houses.
Yes. So for the benefit of people that aren't in our room, the question is how the insulation can be applied to the houses, and whether or not the houses that don't have the insulation or that do feel when you walk in. Do they still feel the same? And I, having walked into one of each, they feel similar. I have to say, it's interesting to see that the plywood is still there, and you can see the grains of the plywood on the wall and see the conduit going over. So when they would add the insulation, of course, they would then have to add another, basically another wall. So, and that is the same thing with adding the stucco on the exterior. They wouldn't necessarily apply it directly to that plywood. They would add another barrier. So. Yes. So that's, yeah, it would either be that they built kind of inward and added the insulation between the exterior plywood and the interior drywall, or built out and added the rigid insulation and then stuck it over that. Well, there's a predominance of stucco in the neighborhood, so I think I would agree with you there. So.
Okay. Well, I think we're done for the day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Molly.